Devotional for today is going to be, do you have great faith? So let me ask you a question. What does a Roman centurion and a Canaanite woman have in common? A Roman centurion and a Canaanite woman. Andrew, you hit it on the head. They had great faith. In all of the scriptures, Jesus only commended two people for having great faith. In both times, it was not an Israelite. It was not a disciple that followed Jesus. It was a Gentile in both cases. These weren't insiders. They weren't raised Jews. They weren't raised under the law. They didn't know the prophets. They were people that had faith in God, but were not raised around it. They weren't his closest friends that would follow him. What made their faith great? In Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 through 13, we find the story of the centurion. Now, we're not going to read this story because we all know this story, don't we? And if you want to read it, Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 through 13. The centurion, he said there's no need for proximity. You don't even need to be close. He said, the centurion came to Jesus in humility, very humble. Jesus marveled that this centurion had great faith. But the centurion also said, I know what authority is. I have men that are under me. And so he understood. And when he said that, he demonstrated a faith in Jesus that was beyond anything Jesus had ever seen. Because what he was saying is, I understand that you have control over the elements. You have control over everything, that everything is under your authority. I tell a man to go and he goes. I tell a man to come and he comes. You tell anything, you just speak, and the world was created. Not very many people at that time understood who Jesus was. This centurion did. You see, Jesus said, I have not found such great faith, no, not in all of Israel. His disciples were with him. Do you realize that? When he made that statement, his disciples were traveling with him. So not only was he saying, the unfaithful in Israel, I've never seen this type of faith, but even the faithful people that were there, he said, I've not seen such great faith in all of Israel, to include his closest disciples. The Canaanite woman, found in Matthew chapter 15, verses 21 through 28. I'm not going to read this again because I believe we know the story of the Canaanite woman. She had a daughter that was demon possessed. She was a Gentile. She came to Jesus and she wanted her daughter to be freed from these demons, didn't she? She persisted despite silence and apparent rejection. Was she answered right away by Jesus? She wasn't, was she? But she persisted. She humbled herself. Even the little dogs eat the crumbs. So both the centurion and the Canaanite woman, this is something else they have in common. They were very humble. Humble. Were the Jews of that time very humble? Especially the Pharisees, the Sadducees? They weren't very humble, were they? She believed in Jesus' mercy even from the margins. Jesus responded, "O woman, great is your faith." Her faith was bold, humble, and unrelenting. She didn't argue for her worth. Remember, Jesus says it's not fit to give the children's food to the dogs. Can you imagine somebody saying that to you? She didn't argue for her worth. She said, even the dogs get the crumbs. She understood who she was, and she understood who she was to the one that was standing there too. Even the dogs get the crumbs. She didn't argue for her worth. She argued for Christ's worth. The contrast, faithless familiarity versus faithful outsiders. In Mark chapter 4 and verse 40, we have another account. Jesus rebukes his disciples during a storm. Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? They had proximity to Christ, but they had no trust. The centurion and the Canaanite woman had distance between where they were and what they wanted healed, who they wanted healed. But they believed Jesus, showing that faith isn't inherited. Their families weren't Jews, were they? They didn't grow up in the Jewish religion. The Jews did, but faith isn't inherited, is it? It's something we learn to have, and we put our trust in God. Theological truths. There in Matthew chapter 8 and verse 12, outer darkness is reserved for those who presume salvation without faith. If you think that just because you're a Jew, you're going to have salvation, this is what Jesus was telling them. If you think just because you're a Jew, you're going to have salvation, think again. Think again. And if you think that just because you're sitting in these pews, you're going to have salvation, think again. Because as Tim was saying earlier, service is more than just merely sitting here, isn't it? We have a responsibility to be here, but service, true service, is serving one another, is actually doing something. The sons of the kingdom were cast out, not because they were Jews, but because they didn't believe. Jesus' statement, I have not found such great faith, and no, not even in all of Israel, is a divine indictment against the Jews. Every single one of them that was standing there, even his disciples, he was telling them that this Canaanite, or this centurion soldier, this Gentile, this person that you don't even like, has better faith than any of you. If Jesus was here today, what would he say of our faith? Would he look out at the world and find people in the world that have a better faith than we do? There are people in the denominational world that aren't even members of the church that understand the importance of being in services, that understand the importance of going to people and making sure that people are converted. What kind of faith do we have? So do you have great faith? Not faith that follows out of habit, not faith that waits for signs, not faith that just sits in pews, not faith that merely states, I'm a part of God's family, I'm saved because I'm here. But faith that says, just say the word. Just say the word and my servant will be healed. Jesus, you even give crumbs to the dogs. Healing my child or healing my daughter of these demons, to you is a crumb. And it was, wasn't it? Challenge for today. Let your faith be the kind that makes heaven marvel. Not inherited, not assumed, but exercised with bold trust and a servant heart of humility. If you have a need of Christ in any way, be like the Roman centurion. Be like the Canaanite woman. Put your trust wholly and entirely in Christ. And understand that faith is not inherited. Simply because we're Christians, simply because we're here, simply because we're sitting in these pews, doesn't guarantee us a place in heaven. Doing the will of the Father does. Matthew 7:21. If you have a need of this congregation in any way, if you've never put him on the water grave of baptism, or if you have and you need to come back, don't wait. Come forward now as we stand and sing the song of invitation.
I have decided.